I joined Teach for America, and I was assigned to teach in Baltimore. Yeah. I had my first interview for a real job at Yorkwood Elementary School in North Baltimore. Keisha, my fellow corps member, and I were driving to the interview in my new red Honda Civic, which didn't have air conditioning, but did have a CD player. We rolled down the windows despite the rain and sang along to Lauryn Hill. That thing, that thing, that thing. We were feeling so good. We were excited about our new jobs in a new city. Neither Keisha nor I was from Baltimore. This is one of the criticisms of Teach for America's program, that they bring in teachers from outside, teachers who don't really know the cities that they're about to teach in. Keisha and I did not know Baltimore. I printed directions to get us to the school, but they were not holding up to the rain, the road construction, and our general cluelessness. We arrived at the interview, but we were 2 hours late. Deborah Sharp, the principal of Yorkwood Elementary School, agreed to interview us anyway. And to our great surprise, she hired us on the spot. Even though she hadn't finished interviewing all the other candidates. To be fair, I think she saw us for what we were. Cheap, inexperienced labor who wouldn't be sticking around long. About half of Teach for America's teachers leave their placements after the first 2 years. I didn't know this at the time. There were a lot of things that I didn't know about what teaching in Baltimore would be like. This was before the 4th season of The Wire came out and educated the entire country on Baltimore City's public schools. In fact, that 4th season was filmed during my 2nd year of teaching, and Dave Kwan, one of my best 4th grade students, auditioned and landed himself a small speaking role on the show. He was a 10-year-old drug runner. Over time, I learned things about my new city. I learned that Baltimore was home to Orioles baseball, duck pin bowling, and the 2nd worst performing schools in the country. I received four weeks of summer training before stepping inside my classroom for the first time. This was kind of like sending someone to summer camp before they go to war. When I joined TFA, my hope was to teach high school English. I wanted to share my love of Zora Neale Hurston, John Steinbeck, and Walt Whitman with my students. I was assigned to teach 31 4th graders, a third of whom couldn't read yet. Some people ease into adulthood. Adulthood is a pool of water that they dip one toe in at a time. I, on the other hand, was clearly taking a cold water plunge. I had to wake up at 6 every morning. My friends were going out on weeknights and partying, and I had morphed into my grandmother and was in bed by 9 p.m. Despite my early bedtime, I was sick all the time. I don't know if you guys know this, but cooties are real, and 4th graders have them. When I wasn't sick, I was planning lessons. I was now responsible for teaching math, which as an English major was a problem. I had to figure out how to do the math, and then I had to figure out how to teach it to 31 4th graders. 35 now, that's math that I could do, because Keisha quit in October and they were not able to replace her. I remember learning something about how some students need to touch things in order to learn, so I decided to plan a lesson where I would teach my students how to multiply using Cheerios. The morning of the lesson, I arrived at school early, and I set everything up out on the students' desks. It was impeccable. As the students walked in the room, you could hear their hum of excitement. Dante came in, and he looked at his desk, and he looked at me. "Miss Hutto, can I eat them?" "No, Dante, we're gonna use them to learn math." Dante's excitement visibly dissipated, but I kept on. I put up a sample problem on the board, and I showed the students how to group the Cheerios to solve the problem. And to my great surprise and delight, they were getting it. I could see the light bulbs going on around the room. I'm circling the classroom and I'm checking their work and I'm putting smiley faces next to their names and I'm giving them high fives and I'm starting to sing. That thing, that. I get to Hanif's desk. He is not getting it, which is okay. I think that this is a good time to point out what he has done wrong and to show him how he could try again. Hanif thinks differently. He doesn't want to try again. In fact, he shouts to the entire classroom that math is stupid, which I don't exactly disagree with, but it's not the time for that. And I am stupid, and he does not need to learn stupid math from a stupid teacher. And to emphasize his point, he takes his entire desk and knocks it over onto the floor. The Cheerios, which I had spent my very limited teacher budget on, spilled everywhere. At this point, Corey decides this is the perfect opportunity to take his Cheerios and pelt them at Hanif's head. Hanif does not appreciate this. He picks up his heavy math textbook and he is about to use it, not for math. I managed to get the textbook out of his hands and save Corey from getting hit with it. I separate the boys and I send them to the back of the classroom and I tell them something super smart, like copy the dictionary. And Dante raises his hand. And I am still so naive that I think we are going back to this beautifully crafted lesson. I've got this. Miss Hutto. Yes, Dante. Can I eat the Cheerios now? Yes, Dante. A few weeks later, I arrive at school and I learn that Corey and Hanif have been suspended. They were fighting in the school auditorium before school started, and there were no adults present when there should have been. I ran into Miss Sharp in the hallway, and I feel like I should say something. I don't mean to brag, but I'm kind of an expert on the boys trying to fight each other at this point. I tell her that I don't think this would have happened if there had been adult supervision at the time, and that it's not fair to punish the boys for what is clearly an adult mistake. Later that day, I am called down to the principal's office. Miss Sharp apparently is not a woman who appreciates feedback. She takes me into her air-conditioned office, the only room in the building that has air conditioning, and she sits me down and she scolds me for 10 minutes. You need to learn your place, she said. I learned that if I needed help, I couldn't ask Miss Sharp. Every school has a heart, and Mrs. Burton was the heart of Yorkwood Elementary. And I learned that if I needed help, I needed to go to Mrs. Burton. She wore purple pantsuits with white orthopedic nursing shoes, and she commanded respect. If Corey and Hanif misbehave, she said, you send them to me. And I did, because you didn't argue with Mrs. Burton. And it worked. Mrs. Burton had earned her reputation over years of hard work. The students saw themselves in her. I couldn't step into her shoes, but she helped me anyway. Fast forward to a year later. It is my second year at Yorkwood, the year that The Wire came out, and it's also my birthday. And I find myself once again waking up at 6 a.m., fighting off another cold, and questioning my life's choices. I no longer needed a map to get to school. I had memorized my route by that point, but I was feeling pretty lost. I didn't know if I could keep doing this. Tried to muster the strength for another day. There were some good days, thanks to Mrs. Burton, but there were a lot of other days. Days when it felt like no one cared and no one was learning anything. Took a deep breath, started to walk towards my classroom, and I heard shouting. So I ran to my classroom, and I turned on the lights, and my students are present, and there are no adults in the room. But they are not fighting. They are throwing me a surprise party. Daquan, the drug runner on the wire, organized everything. He brought in a store-bought lemon cake with white icing, and it read, "Happy birthday, Miss Hutto." Several of the students brought gifts, which they insisted I open immediately. I received a framed Our Father prayer in Spanish, earrings, not earrings, just earring backs, and a beheaded ceramic angel, which I don't think was intentional, but just a casualty of Hanif's backpack. Hanif shyly smiled at me, and I realized in that moment that Miss Sharp was right about one thing. I did need to find my place, and I had. This year marks my 20th year as a public school teacher.